Thought this was humorous. This is the Liver King is being sued for $25 million after revelation he was actually on steroids. The lawsuit argues that customers were forced to buy Liver King supplements. They were not forced to buy Liver King supplements, and I'm not defending Liver King. I'm going to get into the craziness because I really think this is probably going to be the end of the psychotic, ridiculously unfounded health claims of the carnivore diet. Okay, Brian Johnson, also known as the Liver King, is being sued for $25 million by a lawsuit claiming that he misled customers who purchased his products or his supplements. Yes, he did mislead customers, but that's not the same as forcing somebody to buy something. So Brian Johnson, this is the thing though, okay, for example, when people say McDonald's made them fat, or Dunkin' Donuts made them fat, or Taco Bell made them fat, or whoever made them fat, no. McDonald's, Dunkin' Donuts, Burger King, etc., these places are not health food restaurants. These aren't health clubs you're going to. People know that you're not supposed to eat that food in large quantities. That's one of the things I did not like about the movie Super Size Me. I thought it was disingenuous in the fact that it's really hard, unless you're looking at people that weigh like 700 pounds, to find people that really eat like that. Most people that I personally know that aren't fat, now remember, I did do a fat people group, so the people in the group that were to lose weight, yes, some of them did eat quite a bit of fast food. But for the most part, people that I know in everyday life eat maybe a couple times a week or maybe once a day. They'll go to a fast food place to get food, and they know it's not healthy for them. It's not like these fast food places put a gun against their head and they're telling them, eat our food. No, they do it because it's convenient or what have you, or because they didn't plan well, what have you, something like that. And occasionally I do that. I'll get something vegan at Taco Bell. Very rarely, but I do it. I don't do it as often, mostly because of the price, not because you can get vegan options at Taco Bell. So Brian Johnson has become social media famous in recent years for his ridiculously ripped physique and his ridiculous primal carnivorous diet. Okay, as the Texans handle suggests, eats a lot of liver and other animal organs. Last month, internet star Brian Johnson, also known as the Liver King, was outed after leaked emails revealed he took more than $10,000 of performance-enhancing drugs every month. Now, keep in mind, the reason he can afford these performance-enhancing drugs is because of his idiotic fans that don't educate themselves. Okay? In the era we're living in now, you can educate yourself. You can educate yourself, okay? He later apologized for this, right, blah, blah. Okay, I don't really care about his apology. It doesn't matter to me. If God made butter, he would have called it bone marrow, blah, blah, blah. Lawsuit says encouraged diet was unsustainable. Of course it's unsustainable. And I'm going to get into some of these crazy, like, people will say that I am too hard on carnivore dieters or things like that. It's because the carnivore diet is an extremely restrictive, unsustainable diet for most people, okay? And long term, it's most likely probably going to result in horrible health effects, okay? That's just the truth. That's just what we know. That is what science tells us about nutrition and how it affects the body. And then people will say, well, vegans make outrageous health claims. Yes, there are certain vegans that make unrealistic health claims. Some of them, I think that you could say, perhaps Dr. Sebi has made some unrealistic health claims, although I was just watching him. Apparently, he didn't ever consider himself a vegan. A lot of other people make ridiculous health claims, like the Banana Girl and her ex-husband or ex-boyfriend or whatever he was. But, the thing is, these are extreme forms of veganism that anybody I know, and this is the thing, to be fair, I am the only person I know that follows a 100% plant-centered diet. I don't call myself a vegan. I call myself a strict vegetarian. I will use the terms interchangeably on social media so people know what I'm talking about, but I'm not a vegan because I don't buy into 100% all of the ethical concepts of veganism and things like that. So I'm not technically a vegan. I'm a strict vegetarian that follows a 100% plant-based diet. And I also take some supplements that, maybe there's animal products in them. Maybe there's gelatin on my capsules. Maybe I'm not really that worried. And in my opinion, I don't think the beef industry or the pork industry is being floated by my use of, of gelatin capsules or anything like that. I don't think that's why the beef industry is the way it is. Okay? And I'm going to move on now. Now, what's actually kind of sad is Liver King actually did kind of rip off of the, 8 Laws of Health, the Adventist 8 Laws of Health, and a lot of this somewhat makes kind of sense until you actually look at what he's saying. But as I said, what he considered the most important thing, if you ever watch his video where he has syringes full of maple syrup in big hunks of meat, he thinks that the eat tenet of his ancestral tenets was the most important. So let's look at what that is. The second ancestral tenet is eat because we evolved eating the whole animal. Okay, now remember, I've done videos explaining how eating liver caused vitamin A toxicity in our prehistoric ancestors, which was known to have occurred due to looking at the bones, okay? In the modern, so eating liver, there's nutrients in the liver that you're not going to get elsewhere, but there's too many nutrients in parts of the liver, and there's also a lot of toxins in the liver. So in a modern world, we choose processed foods and muscle meats over the most nourishing, nutrient-dense bits like liver, he explains, and bone marrow, he explains. Okay, this is horse shit. Okay, and then people have seen my videos on oils, right? And the health benefits of olive oil, canola oil, corn oil. These things are actually healthy oils. And he's claiming they're unhealthy. That's not what the science says. So another dude that has made wildly exaggerated claims about eating a carnivorous diet, and he doesn't even follow a carnivorous diet. He follows a diet that is like a lot of fruit. Well, he used to follow a carnivore diet. He claimed to anyway. Now he follows a diet that I did a video about how it could impact the liver because it's very high in fruit, which is very high in fructose. And fructose, if you eat a lot of fructose, it can cause hepatic or shock to the liver. It can destroy your liver. That's known. They know that, okay? So, myth-busting the carnivore MD. Who is the carnivore MD? He's a psychiatrist named Paul Saladino. People know my views on psychiatry. I think it's a fraud. I think it's voodoo masquerading as medicine. So, as his name suggests, okay, plants are bad for you is his number one. He claims that. Carnivore MD has claimed that plants make phytoalexins, which are defense chemicals. For this, we can infer that they are warning us off and shouldn't be eaten. The problem with this claim is that meat contains compounds that can be considered toxic too, and why are all those herbivore or omnivore animals okay to eat? The defense chemicals in plants, not to mention the fact that some of the longest living people in the world are from societies that eat a lot of plants. And I'm going to get into this, okay? Meat is a superfood. Carnivore MD has often talked about, and this is the thing with superfoods. You're going to have to define what the fuck a superfood is. Because people just call everything a superfood. Okay, the tribal trope is a compelling scientific argument. It's likely that they ate this way because they didn't have regular access to food. Okay, that's true to an extent that there are very few hunter-gatherers that eat a lot of meat. But usually it's sparsely, for example, somebody explained to me that the Tarahumara, they're not even hunter-gatherers, but they've seen them eat a goat. Okay, people that eat meat in these traditional societies, they'll eat meat here or there, and they might even eat a lot of meat here or there. But meat is not the centerpiece of their diet. People value meat because it is a calorically dense food. When you're poor, you value things that are calorically dense. If you look at other parts of the developing world in Asia and Mexico, which is actually, I think, not the developing world. I think Mexico is actually a fairly decent country. But you'll see people eat insects. Why? Because they need nutrients, they need nourishment, so they eat insects because they can get them. Does that mean we should eat insects? Hell no. Okay? And the same thing is somewhat true for meat, I think, to a large extent. And I don't encourage people to not eat meat, okay? Unless you feel like it, unless that's your calling. With me, it's an ethical thing. I don't eat meat due to an ethical, my own ethics. Okay, every nutrient you can get from plants, you can get from meat. Well, no, you can't. It's true that meat and other animal foods contain better levels of some nutrients, heme, iron, B12, creatine, for example. But there are certain nutrients that you would struggle to get in optimal amounts from meat. Vitamin C, E, and fiber are some. Balance wins out over this. Now, what's funny is, you're not going to get fiber from meat, obviously. But more importantly, vitamin C, and you can say things like, well, if you eat the adrenal glands of an elk, nobody's doing that shit, okay? And then there's also toxins and things like that you got to worry about with that stuff. Hunter-gatherer tribes ate a carnivore diet, okay? No, this is not true. Studies show the men of the Hadza get around 40% of their calories from meat and women less than 5%. They actually eat a lot of honey, fruit, and tubers. And this is why this goofball has started this high fruit, high honey diet that is probably not too good for the liver. Not to mention that the high meat diet isn't good for the liver also. Is a carnivorous diet good for you? A carnivore diet that restricts your food to meat and organ meat only is not really good for you. It lacks important nutrients like dietary fiber and some micronutrients, and it's difficult to maintain. It also has way too much vitamin A in it, okay, if you're eating a lot of liver meat. Meat and organ meat do have some health benefits, okay? They are high in protein, can be low in fat, and are void of carbs and sugars. They are valuable sources of iron, zinc, essential fatty acids, and some important micronutrients like vitamin B12. Meat has some nutritional benefits, but this doesn't automatically mean that more is better. And this is the thing. People that eat a plant-centered diet that is like 90% plants are getting more than enough meat in their diet to get what few benefits there are in meat. I prefer to eat zero meat. Okay, like for example, I supplement with carnitine, and I supplement with taurine, and I supplement with the B-complex vitamins, amongst others. Why do I supplement with taurine, and why do I supplement with carnitine? For heart health. Okay, because those are two amino acids that are made by the human body, but may not be made adequately enough. Now, that being said, it's not, and I'm going to show this later, it's not vegans you see dropping dead from heart failure and things like that, which you would expect if there was an issue with taurine or something like that. But I feel that taurine is, it's an insurance policy. Now, before I continue, I do want people to know I'm not a doctor. I'm not a physician of any kind, not an MD, not a DO, not a chiropractor, not an ND, not a nurse practitioner, not an LPN, nothing like that, not a dietitian, not a nutritionist. This is not health advice. Moving on. Now, I found this humorous because this is the one study that there's studies on carnivore dieters. Now, this is funny because a lot of carnivore dieters like Frank Tufano will be like, it's self-reported, where's the mechanism? I want the mechanism. And then he got to the point where he just doesn't believe in science. So, keep in mind, this is allegedly 2,029 adults consuming a carnivore diet, self-reported. A total of 2,029 respondents reported consuming a carnivore diet for 14 months, motivated primarily by health reasons. 93% red meat consumption was reported. Nobody knows what these people were eating as daily or more by 85%. Blah, blah, blah. 10% reported consuming vegetables, fruits, or grains more often than monthly. So is that really a carnivore diet, or is that an omnivore diet? And 37% denied vitamin supplement use. Prevalence of adverse symptoms was low. Mind you, this is self-reported, so a lot of people are probably getting either a placebo effect or some actual health benefits, which I'm going to talk about when I talk about low carbohydrate diets and the health benefits of low carbohydrate diets. By the way, a low carbohydrate diet can be vegan. Okay, conclusion. Contrary to common expectations, adults consuming a carnivore diet experienced, which is subjective, few adverse effects, and instead reported health benefits and high satisfaction. Why do I find this hilarious? Because, like I said, this is what carnivore dieters and other high protein aficionados like to claim is the problem with vegans, is that they claim all these health benefits based on self-reporting surveys. Well, the truth of the matter is, what you will find with plant-centered diets is not only do they use, like what they do is they do these epidemiological studies and they show, well, it seems like eating a bunch of plants is good for you. So then they take that into a laboratory setting or in some kind of more restricted setting to control the variables, and as I'm going to show you. And what happens is, lo and behold, eating a lot of plants actually is good for you. And it's proven when you put these people on these plant-centered diets and they get the health benefits. This is not showing any facts. You're not seeing any lipids. You're not seeing any inflammation. This is just what people are saying. Many people know that I am a huge fan of what? The Atkins diet. I talk about Dr. Atkins a lot. I'm a fan of Dr. Atkins. So results, 49 patients completed the study. Now this is the thing. These are very real benefits from a low carbohydrate diet for type 2 diabetes. Does that mean that the diet has to be all meat? No, it doesn't. People know what a low-carb diet is, and if they don't, they should go to Atkins.com or look up the Zone Diet or some shit like that and see what a low-carbohydrate diet is. It's not what you think. It doesn't have to be all meat. So firstly, they designed a 6-point formula, blah, blah, blah. They're checking all this crap. So, and you guys can read this on your own. So 49 patients completed the study, blah, blah, blah. Conclusions. A low-carbohydrate diet can improve blood glucose more than a low-fat diet in Chinese patients with type 2 diabetes. So keep that in mind. A low-carbohydrate diet does show benefits over a low-fat diet in the control of blood glucose. This is a very real health benefit of low-carbohydrate diets. Not carnivore diet, low-carbohydrate diets. So as I was saying, you can get the benefits plus, okay? You want more benefits, do a vegan version of what would be called a low-carbohydrate diet. So the effect of a plant-based, low-carbohydrate Eco-Atkins diet on body weight and blood lipid concentrations in hyperlipidemic subjects. You see, this is they're measuring things. This isn't just people being like, yo, dude, I ate this stuff and now I can fly. Okay? It's nothing like that. This is real people with real health concerns, with real blood that's really being measured. Okay? So, low-carbohydrate, high-animal protein diets, which are advocated for weight loss, may not promote the desired reduction in low-density lipoprotein. The effect of exchanging the animal proteins and fats for those of vegetable origin has not been tested as of yet. This tests it. Our objective was to determine the effect, blah, blah, blah. 47 overweight. So these are people that are actually overweight. actually have high blood fat, they're hyperlipidemic, they're men and women, okay, either one, low carbohydrate diet, high vegetable protein, okay, plant-based diet, or a high carbohydrate lacto-ovo vegetarian diet. Now, I would have liked to see this go head-to-head with the traditional Atkins diet, but the result, weight loss was similar for both diets. However, reduction in LDL cholesterol, well, it actually did go head-to-head with, it went head-to-head with both a regular low-carbohydrate diet and with the low-fat diet. So weight loss was similar for both diets, blah, blah, blah. However, reductions in LDL, the conclusion, I have to find that other study actually. A low-carbohydrate plant-based diet has lipid-lowering advantages over a high-carbohydrate, low-fat weight loss diet in improving heart disease risk factors, not seen with conventional low-fat diets with animal products. So keep that in mind. Diets with animal products do not lower the same thing. Okay, it doesn't work the same way. So, moving on here. This is essentially the long form of that same study. Okay, conclusion, a low carbohydrate hold on a second here. Effective 6-month vegan low carbohydrate Eco-Atkins diet on cardiovascular risk factors and body weight in hyperlipidemic adults, a randomized controlled study. Objective, blah, blah, blah. We know what the objective is. Intervention. Participants were advised to consume either a low carbohydrate vegan diet or a high carbohydrate lacto-ovo vegetarian diet. So this is the traditional lacto-ovo vegetarian diet going head-to-head with the, or vegan diet going head-to-head with the Eco-Atkins diet, which is, of course, the prescribed, it's a low carbohydrate vegan diet. 23 participants completed the 6-month ad libdem study, the approximate blah, blah, blah. Conclusions. The self-selected low-carbohydrate vegan diet containing increased protein and fat from gluten and soy products, nuts, and vegetable oils had lipid-lowering advantages over a high-carbohydrate, low-fat weight loss diet, thus improving heart disease risk factors. So you are seeing that this diet works better on heart disease than the traditional lacto-ovo vegetarian diet. So keep that in mind. A low carbohydrate vegan Atkins diet seems to have a better control, probably because of the higher fat content, a better control of hyperlipidemia than a regular lacto-ovo vegetarian diet. Could also be the lack of animal product. So how do we know that eating foods that are high in saturated fat cause problems with the heart? Well, effects of very high saturated fat on LDL particles in adults with atherogenics, okay? Compared with low saturated fat, resulted in significantly greater increases. Okay. So, yeah, a very high saturated fat intake. Now, this is not a normal amount of saturated fat these people are eating. This is not this would be something similar to a carnivore diet. Very high saturated fat intake may increase cardiovascular risk in phenotype B individuals. So let's keep that in mind. So association between fatty acid intake and mortality from all causes, cardiovascular disease and cancer, a systemic review and meta-analysis. Okay, diets high in saturated fat, like the carnivore diet, were associated with higher mortality. Now, I know what you're saying, this is an association, this isn't proving the cause. Okay, well, I just showed you stuff that proves that eating diets high in saturated fat increase the risk factor for these things, right? So bear with me here. So diets high in saturated fat were associated with higher mortality from all causes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer, whereas diets high in seed oils. Now remember, this is part of the shielding tenant in heavy quotations that Liver King had. They don't eat them seed oils, okay? So diets high in polyunsaturated fats were associated with lower mortality from all causes, cardiovascular disease, and cancer. So let's read this one more time. Diets high in saturated fats, which we know increase risk factors for cardiovascular disease, were associated with higher death from cardiovascular disease, cancer, whereas diets high in polyunsaturated fats, like those found in canola oil, were associated with lower mortality from all causes, cardiovascular disease, cancer, okay? Diets high in trans fat were associated with higher mortality from all causes, cardiovascular disease. Diets high in monounsaturated fat, like in pumpkin seeds and olive oil and canola oil, were associated with lower all-cause mortality. So remember that, olive oil, pumpkin seeds, these things. So this might actually be one of the reasons that the Eco-Atkins diet worked. Maybe it wasn't the low carbohydrate, although I know that played a role because I've put people on low carb diets before. I myself had great success with the low carbohydrate diet, but maybe it was the higher fatty acid composition of the Eco-Atkins diet that did the trick. In fact, I would say that was probably a big part of it. Now, I want people to understand this. Like I said, Paul Saladino created this crazy diet of like fruit, honey, and high saturated fatty foods, okay? Meat, okay? So the evidence for saturated fat and for sugar related to coronary heart disease, okay, right here. Okay, so let's read this. Dietary guidelines continue to recommend restricting intake of saturated fats. This recommendation follows largely from the observation that saturated fat can raise, so it's not like it's made up, we know it raises serum cholesterol, okay, thereby putatively increasing the risk of atherosclerotic, and we know that increasing your saturated fat intake, what did I just show you? It's associated with more death from heart disease, but it's also associated and it's proven to raise saturated fats in the blood. It cause hyperlipidemia and hypercholesterolemia, and that then translates to people dropping dead from heart disease. This isn't rocket science, it's common sense. However, total cholesterol is only modestly associated with coronary heart disease, and more important than the total level of cholesterol, blah, blah, blah. Particles that contain elevated levels of glucose. Now, this is what I was trying to explain. Okay, people that are eating stuff like honey. Okay, when my mom would go in, when she would have a low blood sugar, we would give her what? Honey. What's honey? Honey is pure glucose, okay? So, and fructose is also very good at raising the blood sugar and the insulin level, okay? So when you have elevated insulin and elevated blood sugar and elevated saturated fatty acids, it can result in non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and altered platelet function. A diet high in added sugars has been found to cause a threefold increase of death due to cardiovascular disease. But sugars like saturated fats are a diverse class of blah, 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 monosaccharides, blah, 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 blah. To reduce the burden of coronary heart disease, guidelines should focus particularly on reducing the intake of concentrated sugars, specifically the fructose-containing sugars like sucrose and high fructose corn syrup. Now, I know what you're saying. Well, fruit is an added sugar. When you're eating large quantities of fruit, and I know this for a fact, when I went on the starch solution, I was eating a lot of apples because I had to do something to keep full. The starch wasn't doing it. And it raised my triglycerides. My cholesterol was okay, but my triglycerides went way up on a whole food, plant-centered diet. The only thing that could have raised those triglycerides, especially because the fact is I was not really eating any fat, no added fat on the starch solution. So those apples and the starch that would convert to sugar is most likely what raised my triglycerides. Okay, it also caused me to gain a hell of a lot of weight and destroyed my body composition. So this isn't just me picking on carnivores here. There's a lot of problems that go around when you're eating these highly kooky, like just plain insane diets that don't seem to be based in the science at all. Plant-based diets are associated with a lower risk of incidence of cardiovascular disease, mortality, and all-cause mortality in a general population of middle-aged adults. From the American Heart Association, this is a look at the thing. Diets high in plant foods and lower in animal foods were associated with lower risk of cardiovascular morbidity and mortality. But wait, that says association. That doesn't mean causation, but I just showed you that it did in previous studies that I showed. The effect of plant-based diet on plasma lipids in hypercholesterolemic adults. Again, this is not just, oh, I ate this food and it did this. They're measuring things here. As I said, first you look at the epidemiological research and then you devise clinical investigations to see if it actually works. That's the difference between a plant-centered diet. There's a lot of meat to the plant-centered diet in the sense that there's a lot of meat to what they're saying. So this is about participants, blah, 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 results. Okay, 4-week changes in low-fat and low-fat plus groups with blah, 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 yada, yada. Conclusion, previous national dietary guidelines primarily emphasized avoiding saturated fat and cholesterol. As a result, the guidelines probably underestimated the potential cholesterol LDL lowering effect of diet. In this study, emphasis on including nutrient-dense plant-based foods consistent with recently revised national guidelines increased the total LDL cholesterol lowering effect of a low-fat diet. So when you're adding nutrient-dense whole foods, it drives down the LDL further than it would with just a regular diet, avoiding the nutrient-dense foods, but simultaneously avoiding the high saturated fat foods. So that nutrient density helps to play a role in lowering the LDL cholesterol further. Again, that's probably another reason that the Eco-Atkins diet worked better, is because a lot of the vegetables consumed on the Eco-Atkins diet are things like green leafy vegetables and more nutrient-dense, less calorically dense, less carbohydrate dense, thereby less calorically dense forms of plant foods. A plant-based diet for coronary artery disease. A mandate for effective therapy. This is from this dude here. I recommend you read it on your own. I don't feel like going over it. Caldwell B. Etzelsten. A plant-based diet, atherogenesis, and coronary artery disease prevention. This is the abstract, going through it, introduction, yada yada. You guys can read this all on your own. Okay, coronary artery disease prevention. Vascular endothelial cell injury, or vascular endothelial cells play a key role in the regulation of vascular homeostasis, which means the balance of the environment. And increasing evidence suggests that alterations in endothelial function contribute to the pathogenesis and clinical expression of cardiovascular coronary artery disease. Low-density lipoprotein oxidation epidemiologic data has shown that people with high consumption of fruit and vegetables are at a lower risk of death compared with those with a low consumption. Data from the nurses study, Macrophage activation, consuming large amounts of red meat, is a risk factor for heart disease. Researchers prospectively followed 84,136 women aged 30 to 55 in the nurses study. The authors reported that higher intakes of red meat were significantly associated with elevated risk of heart disease. Discussion: plant-based nutrition can prevent diabetes. Keep this in mind. This is from studies, okay? Plant-based nutrition can prevent diabetes, high blood pressure, coronary artery disease events, The benefits of a predominantly plant-based nutritional regime deserve further consideration on the basis of the information. See, why do they want further consideration? Why do they want to look at this further? So they can do more to prove it. Unlike the carnivore diet, where it's like, yo, people that ate this way were like, yo, I feel amazing. And if you look at people like Sverige, or like if you look at some of the people that promote these meat-centered diets, they're freaking crazy. I wonder what the level of psychosis was in that. Did they also get their psychiatric histories and things like that to prove they weren't psychotic? Because a lot of the people I see promoting carnivore diets they suffer from narcissism. They suffer from a lot of, I mean, you can see I'm not a professional, but you got to look at these people. They're very narcissistic, very self-centered, very suffering from orthorexia. Some of them suffer from anorexia. I would almost guarantee that the mental illness level of the people eating a carnivore diet is ridiculously high. Okay, and they're not looking at that at the self-reporting thing. That's just like a bunch of people ate some food or said they ate some food that we don't really know if they ate, and they said that they feel good without measuring any lipids or anything like that. Whereas with the plant-centered diets, there's evidence, okay? Compared with people who frequently, okay, so let's see here. Predominantly plant-based nutritional regimes deserve further consideration on the basis of the information presented in this article compared with people who frequently consume red meat. People who eat less red meat and consume more vegetables have lower body mass index, lower systolic blood pressure, lower serum levels of LDL, and thinner blood vessel intimal medial wall thickness. Finally, consumption of a heavily plant-based diet has been shown to result in less oxidative stress and less microinflammation compared with omnivores, meat-centric diet, reducing risk factors for atherosclerosis with a plant-based diet may help to understand the potential plant-based diet the potential a plant-based diet has on down-regulating the process of atherogenesis, which means the hardening of the arteries, and atherothrombotic, which means blood clots, coronary artery disease. Therefore, food may be medicine, and the power of lifestyle management in disease prevention should not be ignored compared with drug therapy, angiography, and stent placement. And as I've said, I'm not against medicine. I believe in utilizing healthy lifestyle in conjunction with modern medicine, okay? So, and by blah, 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 plant-based diet may be a low-cost intervention that can prevent and reverse atherosclerotic coronary artery disease. 93% of Americans are omnivores and are unlikely to give up meat. Historically, humans have consumed meat in varying amounts based upon environmental accessibility to plant foods and general food scarcity. Industrialization has allowed meat to become a central part of our food culture and our plates, and it is highly regarded as the best source of protein. The data presented in this article suggests that once we develop a plant-based diet, microbiota, our bacteria, will not convert phosphatidylcholine or L-carnitine to TMAO. And this is another thing. So choline and carnitine are converted to an inflammatory substance called TMAO in the diets of people that eat meat, but not in the diets of people that don't eat meat. So people might have asked me, why do I take L-carnitine, like other plant-centered eaters, why do you take L-carnitine when it can cause TMAO? It cannot cause TMAO in the gut of a strict vegetarian, okay? It doesn't do that. So when you're eating the isolated amino acid, like I do, it doesn't turn into TMAO. In addition, the data presented in this article suggests that polyphenols from fresh fruits and vegetables increase survival, and that elevated TMAO levels from red meat were associated with decreased survival. You can read this on your own. Consumption of a defined plant-based diet, meaning one that is defined, where you know what the person is eating, or I'll just go to the conclusion. It reduces lipoproteins, inflammation, and other atherosclerotic lipoproteins and particles within 4 weeks. A defined plant-based diet has a favorable impact on inflammatory indicators. Concentration was previously thought to be only minimally altered by dietary interventions. Keep this in mind, because if it's altered in a positive way by a plant-centered diet, how do you think it's altered by a meat-centered diet? So in this protocol, however, a defined plant-based diet was shown to substantially reduce this biomarker further, blah, blah, blah. So again, these are facts. These are things that are observed in a laboratory type setting where variables are controlled, so we know that it's the diet doing it. A plant-based diet and heart failure. Okay, so this goes on. You can read this on your own. This is from 198 patients with cardiovascular disease. Most of the volunteer patients with cardiovascular disease responded to intensive counseling, and those who sustained a plant-based nutrition for the mean of 3.7 years experienced a low rate of subsequent cardiac events. This dietary approach to treatment deserves a wider test to see if adherence can be sustained in broader populations. A plant-based diet and heart failure. 79-year-old man. Okay, this is the same thing. You guys can read this on your own. A comprehensive review on the effects of vegetarian diets on coronary heart disease. Okay. Our data search returned a total blah, blah, blah. Their articles also revealed that adherence to a plant, this is from a meta-analysis, that adherence to a plant-based diet was inversely related to the incidence of heart failure risk, and that a vegetarian diet is beneficial for secondary prevention of coronary artery disease via modulation of lipid profile, reduction in body mass index, and patients having a high concentration of plasma antioxidants, micronutrients in their system. Also, it was seen that consumption of a plant-centered diet starting in young adulthood is associated with a lower risk of cardiovascular disease by middle age. What are the healthiest foods to eat in the blue zones? Okay, well, the best of the best longevity foods are leafy greens such as spinach, kale, beet, and turnip tops, chard, and collards. Combined with seasonal fruits and vegetables, whole grains and beans dominate the blue zones meals all year round. Many oils derive from plants, and they are all preferable to animal-based fats. Remember, that includes corn oil and canola oil, as well as olive oil. You know, they all are beneficial to the heart. I've done many videos on that and showed the science behind it.